Hello, everyone. My name is Wes Asmal. Welcome to another episode of Two Ways to Skin a Cat, a show where we talk career experiences, entrepreneurship, and investments. The main aim is to show that there's more than one way to be successful other than just climbing the corporate ladder. This is another surprise stream, hopefully my last one. I'm trying to see how this performs compared to those that have been pre-scheduled. Now, we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the show will be available on podcast by tomorrow. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to get automatically notified when the next episode comes out. If you're watching live, drop a 1 in the comments so that I know I'm not talking to myself, and drop a 2 in the comments if you're watching the recording. So today, I will be talking about how to deal with a difficult manager. I'm sure many of you have had difficult managers before, so a lot of you can relate. Now, for context, I've worked in many different roles in various companies. So I've worked for many different managers. I had some good managers, some great managers, and some bad managers. And generally, I've worked longer for supportive managers than for unsupportive managers. That's just for interest's sake. Now, let's start with let's call it blunt honesty. Some managers are not meant to be managers. Some organizations promote the most successful employees who are very good at their execution roles. But the structure of the organization only allows for promotions after a certain level to get to a manager level. So leaders will decide that certain people are too valuable to lose. So they get promoted to the management level, but they don't necessarily have the capabilities to be a good manager or even a decent manager. Now, dealing with a micromanaging manager is different. It's not about you, it's about them. They have shortcomings that you will not be able to fix. Now, that's a different kettle of fish. And the easiest way out of that is to find another job to get out of that situation. I'm not saying it's the best, but it's the quickest and the easiest way. But there are still things that you can learn from the situation. When you are dealing with a very difficult manager, I learned that, or when I was dealing with a very difficult manager, I learned that as soon as my mental health suffers, I start getting physically sick, and my body starts to tell me that it's time to find a new job. Obviously, I mean, you would also try to have conversations with your manager, but what I want to also mention to you is chances are you are going to deal with more types of difficult managers in the future. So avoiding the situation is not going to help you. So it also doesn't hurt to try to manage them better. So yes, and that you heard me correctly. I said, learn to manage your manager. Look at it as a way that you can also improve. Once you figure out what your manager wants, life becomes easier. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it'll become easier. Your manager might also have had a bad experience with an employee before you and is now treating you in a certain way. I'm not saying that it's fair, but it is what it is. That being said, for certain managers, there's no pleasing them. So you also have to understand the personality of the person you're reporting to. Remember also that first impressions count. So when you're starting a new job or a new role, try your best to start it on a positive note. That always helps. I've started jobs on a negative note, and it's very difficult to dig yourself out of that hole. Yeah, first impressions last as well. Now to my next point. So a very important consideration is communication. Communication is always key. Don't expect your manager to do all the communicating. Remember, your manager is dealing with many projects. So if you can show her that you have this project or role covered, they might be less difficult. They might they might give you a little bit more leeway. Don't just expect that your work should speak for itself. Don't assume I'm doing the work they should know. You need to communicate what you've done because they're not in the detail, because you're in the detail. So don't assume that your work will speak for itself. Now, we'll be responding to questions towards the end, so please add your questions to the comment section now so that I don't miss them. Some of you might take the approach of attacking your manager head on or directly reporting them to their superior openly. And that's probably not the best route. You must remember that your manager has gotten to their position because they've been successful at something. Not necessarily being a manager, but they're successful at something. They're good at something. This means that they've got some political capital. So if you're the first person to complain, your superior is more likely to believe them over you, and you might be labeled as a difficult employee. Now, on the other hand, if a few people rate your manager poorly, that's a different story, because now there's enough evidence to show that they are not a great manager. This doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be successful in changing your manager, improving your manager, or anything like that. The manager might just be reflecting the tone of the top in that organization. And I've been in organizations that reward managers like that, or where managers that reflect the toxic style of the leaders are rewarded. So then you also need to think about that or assess that. If that is the tone of the top in the organization that you're working for, unless you thrive in a toxic environment, and most people don't, for your long-term mental health, you're better off looking for a job in another organization. One more thing to consider, so that it's easy to say, it can be easy to say it's all your manager's fault. And you might be right. But for you to succeed, I've always found that people who take responsibility grow more than people who blame others. In closing, I want to leave you with one message. Remember that this is your life. This is your career. You are responsible for it. No matter how great your firm is or your company is or how bad they are, if you want to succeed, it's on you. You can blame other people for not succeeding, and you might be right. But the only person that's going to negatively affect is you. So take charge of your growth. Take charge of your career. Remember, the final decision is always yours. You are in control. Even if you make the wrong decision, you can change that decision. This was a little bit of a short one, but the show has been live on YouTube and should be available on podcast by tomorrow. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast and you feel that it's added value, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to get automatically notified when the next episode comes out. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Two Ways to Skin a Cat. Goodbye.